Yeah.
You ready to go?
Let's jump into the Pope's encyclical, Part 3, Part Trace.
Part 3. Yeah.
By the way,
I have to
have a
I have to
cold,
practice
so
saying it.
if I sound very nasally or
Yeah,
if
I know. You got sick
I
again.
turn my head and cough, that's okay. It's not because I'm... I just had a visual of
You have
the typical guy's
a
thing
bit
of
of a-
turning your head and being asked to turn your head and cough. But that's not...
My gosh, really? Do you have to bring that up? Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, you're grovelly a little this morning.
Yeah. So
It's your quarterly
it is
head cold.
It's
every quarter.
I welcome every season by
Yes.
getting some kind of illness.
I know. Well,
It's
it's too bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have to practice Magnifica Humanitas. I just it doesn't roll off my tongue very easily, so I had to just say it again. But yeah, we're on our third episode, and we're kind of diving deep. It's interesting because I've been kind of following and listening to what people are saying, and there's been some good commentary, but I've yet to hear anybody really drill down deeply on it. It's all this kind of question of, is AI okay or is AI not okay? And honestly, the depth of his reflection is just, there's so much more. I don't even feel like we can do justice to it in these few episodes that we're doing. Not even close. So again, I just want to pitch that.
It's so funny.
I think doing a class, doing a little mini course on this would be really fun, because
It's just so funny
there's
that
so much there.
we go there. We go there as people. Like we're just like, tell me if it's good or bad. Is this right or wrong? Is this good or bad?
Yeah,
We're not really good at kind of like
going deep.
yeah, or struggling with it, or wrestling with like the deeper concepts of
Well, actually, to be honest with you, it's like there's this rush in the news cycle to just get out there and make a comment, which is fine. I get it. But this is a kind of document that literally, in my opinion, we should be spending like 2 years really delving into as a church, and really figuring out how are we going to implement the vision here as a people. Like, there's 1 billion Christians on earth, and that's a lot of people proportionate to the rest of the human race. So we could have a really profound impact on the future if we actually took the time. Like, we have to take time to really study and be formed.
Yes. See, that's why I don't get it. I mean, I only get it in the sense that that's culturally what we're conditioned to do, is like immediate response. But I just don't think it's good. I don't think it's good for us in a lot of things.
It's not helpful. And actually, he actually talks about this when he talks about education. I won't get into it now, but we'll get to it. He has some very profound things to say about what we need to do in this regard, because of what digital culture and ecology has actually done.
Digital culture and what?
Ecology.
Ecology.
We've created like an environment with digital space that is forming us in certain ways that are making other really important human capacities kind of non-existent. Like our incapacity to learn. We don't know how to learn anymore because of what digital and now AI and the algorithms and all that are doing. So
before you jump in, I know, I'm sorry. I just want to. I saw a little clip of this. He's this comedian that was giving, giving a commencement address at Harvard.
Yeah,
maybe?
Conan O'Brien.
No. This was an Asian dude, and he basically was like, screw AI. Like, his whole thing was about, like, AI is the worst thing ever. It's so stupid. We need to, figure out how to put an end to it. And he was making the argument of, like, basically, AI can, summarize your email. It can suggest responses and automatically respond. He's like, but you know what? So can you. He's like, so, why are we giving up these things? It goes back in a way to like the nature. We had that whole podcast on the nature of work, and are some of these things that AI is taking over ultimately like things where I forget how we talked about it, but it was like, is this even what human beings should be doing? Or should we be like, having our direction, our work kind of direction in other ways. That was such a horrible way of saying that. But
Well, yeah, what you're referencing is when we did that podcast on AI, I don't know, a couple months back.
but he basically was like, if
yeah,
humans can do it, let humans do it. What like
yeah, yeah, and the point that we were making is just that there are fundamentally human activities that humans like doing, not because of the outcomes, but because doing it itself is fulfilling.
Okay. Yes. That
And that there are
was way
also
better.
things in the economy that humans have never wanted to do, and we forced humans into doing certain activities after the Industrial Revolution that people still don't want to do, and everybody's happy to give those jobs to more machines.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully AI will free up humans for the opportunity to return to truly human forms of work.
Yeah. That was good.
That's a high hope.
Yeah, I
But-
just thought it was interesting.
no, I mean
that
it's actually that's a good segue. Anything you say can be a good segue because at some point in time we have to jump in.
yeah.
But actually, in this
Go ahead.
case, this really is a good segue into chapter 3 because there's a diagnostic. So let me just retrace our steps very briefly.
Yeah.
You know, in the very beginning of the document, the church is always going to be kind of reading the signs of the times. Like there's an issue, there's something happening that we have to address. Then it's going to lay out a kind of genealogy of the church's history of thought on social matters in that anniversary tradition. And then after that, and we saw this in chapter 2, was what are all of the relevant principles that are going to come to bear? Okay. Now we're going to move into this sort of diagnostic part of the letter. So,
Ooh, okay.
yeah. So Pope Leo is going to sort of analyze and sort of expose, well, what's the real root of the problem that we're facing today? And this is where I think, the church has a perspective and an insight and a wisdom that really is pretty rare out there in the world. And I think that this is where we really have to begin to listen, because if, it's like you can treat symptoms, like when it comes to physical health, and never get to the underlying root cause of the problem that you're having.
Sure.
And it's easy to deal with
Sounds
symptoms.
like medicine in the United States.
Well, no, it is. It's like masking it. Well, on a moral and spiritual level, we can identify all the symptoms of a problem and then try to deal with those symptoms, but we're not really getting to the root problem. So as we move from chapter 3 through the end of the document, there's going to be, you could say, a diagnosis, and then there's going to be directives. And the directives are going to help us understand if this is the underlying problem, this is what the primary solution is. And the Pope's going to tease out all of the particular implications of what the remedy is to the problem. But what happens oftentimes is people get confused and they think he's trying to be an economist or he's trying to be a politician or he's trying to be a policymaker. And it's like, no. You're not understanding the level at which the Pope is trying to address this issue. He's trying to address the problem at the level of the human person.
Mm-hmm.
So if we get the human person right, then politics, economics, culture, education, the family, all these other issues will find their proper resolution. But if we just treat the symptoms of the problem, we're never going to actually eradicate the problem because we haven't identified the root cause.
Right.
So we have the wrong understanding of the human person, and that's why we're having all of these problems.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of, we might want to say, oh, well, let's just get rid of AI and that'll solve the problem. It's like, no, let's get the human person right, and then we'll know how to use AI in the right way. It's not that's a wise response rather than, just embrace AI exactly as it is because it's awesome, because it's so convenient in all these neat ways. Versus, oh my gosh, it's the scariest thing in the world and it's terrible and we should just outlaw and get rid of it. And neither of those solutions are realistic, actually. Neither are possible.
Yeah.
But the real solution is no, let's let's pay much closer attention as a human family to what it means to be human. And if we start living that vision of the human person more intentionally, then all of these other issues will begin to resolve themselves. It's like saying, look, you can take this supplement or this drug, or you can do this fad diet or whatever. There's all these little things, you know. But if you get at the root of the fundamentals of what it means to live a healthy life, get enough sleep, drink enough water, put the right foods in your body, exercise, regularly and consistently, get enough sleep, whatever. Like, if you do those things, all the particular issues, I got this pain in my joint, my shoulder. Oh, my eyes are a little bit blurry. Or, I've got this, athlete's foot all the time on my foot. Like, all those particular issues will resolve themselves if the fundamental level of human health, because you understand the nature of the human body.
Yeah.
Did you know what I'm saying?
But I feel like you could dig
you?
and you could dig even deeper and say, fundamentally, it's probably a virtue problem. Like you lack self-control. Like there's a self-control issue,
right,
or an impulsivity issue that you have, or a temperance issue.
Right. Well, that is an even deeper level, because a lot of those lifestyle problems that we have are rooted in a lack of interior freedom, because we lack the virtues of the moral life.
Right.
So when we live from that place, then we have a more ordered life, which bears the fruit of good health.
Yeah.
So all of this is to say is, I'm just using that as an analogy, as a metaphor. Yeah. So in chapter 3, 4, and 5, the Holy Father is trying to help us understand that the deepest root of the problem is that we don't understand the human person properly, and that that disfigured or disordered view of the human person is what's really behind all of the particular things that we're feeling pain around and struggling with and wrestling with in our society and our culture today. So we can argue about all the symptoms, but what we need to do is get down to the problem. Okay, so chapter 3 is very diagnostic, and the title deals with technology and the problem of dominance, and a certain way in which a mindset has created this very unlivable situation. And he describes it as the technocratic paradigm. He's not the only one. Pope Francis used this language. This language goes back to like John Paul II, Pope Benedict, but this technocratic mindset, and it revolves primarily around the logic of efficiency. So we're trying to make things as efficient as possible. It's the logic of control, which tends to be top down, and then the logic of profit, which is a kind of materialism, that when we maximize profit. So the technocratic mindset is that it's a paradigm that's driven by the logic of efficiency, control, and profit.
Totally makes sense to me.
Okay, and it under that is a kind of materialism and a kind of consumeristic mindset, that humans are fundamentally consumers, and what we have to do is we have to optimize all of our activity for the sake of a level of productivity that just allows us to consume more and more. Now, the problem with the technocratic solution is that it tends to be driven by very, very powerful corporate interest and very strong political interests. So what ends up happening is you have power and centers of power and dominance that are controlled either in the political or in the private business sphere. Sometimes those two things are in bed together. Sometimes they're actually at odds with each other. Sometimes corporate America is doing things in spite of what the government is saying.
Right.
But sometimes government and industry come together in a way that, you see that, for example, during the Nazi era under National Socialism. You could see that under a communist regime. But oftentimes, like in our context in the United States, what we see is a kind of you see the private sector way out in front of the government in terms of shaping centers of power and influence and stuff. So there's a couple of authors that I would point to. One he cites, but I'll bring in another one that I think is really important for thinking through this. But he cites Romano Guardini. He was quoted a lot in Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si on the environment. And Guardini is one of my favorite theologians. He actually wrote a book called The End of the Modern World. And combined with, I would just recommend, if you really want to dig into some of this and you consider yourself a more intellectually minded Catholic, you might want to read that book. It's not a long book. It's pretty short. The other book is C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man. But the premise of those two books is that technology wields incredible power, and by nature it has a tendency to be controlled by the hands of very few people who have enormous influence over the shaping of culture. So if you, again, go back to Lord of the Rings, you think about how the realm of the elves is not dominated and controlled by one single, sort of power source.
Right.
But the evil side of this equation, you think of Sauron and the Eye of Sauron, right? And it's this technocratic, power structure centered in Mordor around these rings. Okay, Rings of Power, by the way, season 3 is coming out in November, and that's one thing I think they've done a decent job of doing is seeing how the use of technology creates a kind of control and a dominance. This is Tolkien's basic insight here. But both C.S. Lewis in The Abolition of Man and Romano Guardini in The End of the Modern World, those two books, both very short, but they really help us understand that when technology is not humanized in the right way, it becomes a tremendous source of power and control and dominance by a very few people, because only a few people have the ability to use the technology. That's the problem, So you can say, oh, well, everybody has a cell phone.
Right.
But a very, very small number of people make the cell phones and control the cell signal.
Yeah.
So they can control what comes in and out of that communication. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
And now you add social media, channels. And again, you have very few people that are exerting enormous influence over our culture, over what goes into our minds, over the way we think, over the values that we have. So that's what he means by the technocratic mindset.
Yeah.
So problem number one is that we in the postmodern, kind of modern postmodern era have embraced technology as a kind of messianic God that's going to deliver us from all of our problems. And the problem is that we've just made our problems worse because we've put way too much power and control into the hands of a very small number of people that get to dictate and shape the kind of environment that we get to live in culturally, politically, and economically.
Yeah.
Okay, so does that make sense?
It does make sense. The couple of thoughts around that is like, it seems like there's a predominant sense of like the people that are controlling it. At least this is a sense I get. Like they can't. There's never enough. Like they're unfulfilled. Ultimately, there's like a void that's like I gotta keep getting more, keep getting more, keep getting more. Whatever that is, like power, control, wealth. It's like there's just this unfulfilled kind of nature that seems at the heart of it to me.
Yeah. Well, I think what's at the root of this, and it's touched on throughout the document, is that when you can monetize something through a technology that exploits what we would as Christians, describe the weaknesses that are inherent within our fallen human condition,
Mm-hmm.
you've just created an enormous capacity for power and dominance over other people, because you can, for all intents and purposes, make everybody addicted to whatever you created.
Right.
And that's the lust to create that technology. Just imagine how far these technologies were to go if they were all free. Like, in other words, there was no profit to be made. There was no money to be made in any of this. What would we actually do with it? Probably not much. Now, obviously, war factors into this. I'm not going to get into that. But there's always this kind of race that goes on, because you want to be essentially the first to market.
Right.
Because when you're first to market, then you control the market. And when you control the market, you make all the money. And when you make all the money, then you also have to have the military that supports the defense of your monopoly on that. And so we're always in this race. Like right now, we're in an AI arms race, you could say, with China.
Yeah.
So but again, it's not the technology that's the problem. It's the fundamental understanding of the human person that's in the way. We believe that we will be better off if we have this kind of monopoly, control, and power over this technology. And then someone says, well, if you're going to do this, then I'm going to do that. And now that's the new thing, right? I was talking to Isaac yesterday, and it was funny because he was talking about how drones have really changed warfare, because the super militaries don't have any legitimate defense yet that's cost effective against drone swarms.
Mm-hmm.
So the little guy has the momentary upper hand right now, but he immediately started talking to me about certain energy and technologies, laser technologies, that will pretty much disable all the drones. But we don't have it yet, but we're working on it. He goes, but it takes enormous amount of energy. You have to produce unbelievable amounts of energy, and so you have to have energy dominance. So we are quickly trying to gain energy dominance in the world so that we can generate the electricity to create, like, you see what I'm saying? I love the Marvel universe in this regard, because it's always a power struggle for who can punch the hardest and who can channel energy in the most effective, powerful way. And so the villain always, levels up the game in conflict, and then the superhero has to,
Right.
and that's a great commentary on the logic of this kind of materialistic, technocratic world that we live in. You can't win in that way, because someone will always come up with the next thing that's the most powerful. And when we tackle the problem by coming at it from the perspective of the human person, then we really disarm that logic and that way of dealing with things, because when you humanize the human experience and really get in touch with what it means to be human, that's in the end what everybody actually truly wants.
Yeah.
But if we don't show up as a church, and people of goodwill don't show up insisting on living in those more humane ways, then the technocratic paradigm always wins and always prevails, because there's nothing to push back on it.
So what do you do? Because I imagine, even me, I'm like sitting here thinking, okay, so of course it's a fundamental distortion of like understanding the human person, or a disorder of the human person that leads to this. So let's say you have a group of people in a country like the United States that wants to, let's just polarize it. They want to do the right thing, right? We're the Avengers. And then you have another country that just they have no interest in the concept of like being a good fundamental person. Like they're all about power or dominance, or what. So what is he hoping will happen? Like, is he hoping that by writing this, that's going to have some, Like, is he just hoping to guide the good guys who are open to listening to this? Or is he hoping that the bad guys, will catch wind of this and reflect and be like, oh, wait a minute, he's right. Like, do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I absolutely I do. Yes. I mean, I think he's first of all, it's a proclamation of the truth. And so the truth has appeal, and it does have but it's got to be coming from a place of true perception and insight.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people will read this and go, I really resonate with what's being said here because that's my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And he's right. We do need to do something about it. But obviously the letter is addressed first and foremost to Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to take the time. We need to be formed by what he's saying here because there's a lot of us. We make up 25% of the United States of America. If every Catholic would just take some time to really, every parish, was taking time to create study groups and do this, I'm going to keep saying this, and really get people thinking about this issue, we would start making different decisions and living different. To go back to a Marvel example that I think illustrates the point, I always love the sub narrative around Captain America and Winter Soldier, and what's at the root of that struggle is this friendship that Bucky has forgotten about because he's lost his memory and he's been turned into this, this kind of half man, this kind of monster, half man, half machine, kind of by all of what the Soviets did to him and so on. But they're in I think it's Winter Soldier I think it's Winter Soldier. They're just duking it out and it's a punching fest. And you can just tell, like, there's no way that we're going to win this. There's a point in the story, and I think this is so critical, where Captain America puts his shield down. And he resorts to awakening Bucky's memory by calling him by his birth name.
Yeah.
And trying to help him remember who he actually is. Like, I'm your best friend. And it's like, yes, exactly. It isn't through technology and through punching each other that they're going to resolve the problem. It's by human connection and friendship. And at the end of the day, it becomes a critical part of the storyline, in Captain America's storyline, but also in, Winter Soldier eventually is liberated from whatever, mind virus he had. And, he discovers his true identity and and there's some pain and trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder that he has to work through. But at the end of the day, it's through the rediscovery of his deepest identity and humanity, as Steve Rogers' childhood friend. That's what changes the fundamental trajectory of the storyline.
Yeah.
That's what Pope Leo is saying, that when human beings start living out of a deep place of their humanity, relationship by relationship, moment by moment, by how we interact with each other in the home, in the workplace, in the government, this is what's going to change the trajectory of the story that we're in right now and the future of humanity. It's not going to be through all the conventional technocratic ways. And he says some interesting things like, you're not going to have one government solution that's going to solve this problem. It's going to be through collaboration, through a common shared vision of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
So
it's good.
Yeah, hopefully that makes some sense.
Total.
So another major point that he makes in chapter 3 has to do with just comparing artificial intelligence to actually human intelligence. I think it's a very insightful little section where, he talks about how AI has this incredible power of computation. So I oftentimes make this argument that AI is really just just a exponentially more powerful computer. And it's still functioning as a result of human programming. And that raises a couple of questions. One, because it's a result of human programming, the programmer is importing his value system into the programming. And that means that he's using a technology as a lever of being able to leverage his value system out into the culture at a disproportionately powerful level.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the first thing that we have to understand is that artificial intelligence is, at the end of the day, it's just a tool. And it's the tool in the hands of human beings that are very bright, and that technology is going to work the way they've designed it to work.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to, that their value system has to be challenged in order for the technology to work differently. So that's the first point that, or one of the points that he makes. Secondly, he talks about how the human intellect is a different kind of thing. And I've said this before, but the lowest function of the human intellect is computation. Data analytics, math.
Mm-hmm.
When you get into the real depth of the human mind, you're talking about things like self-reflection, the interior life, the ability to transcend, the ability to be creative, and even more so, the ability to self-reflect in order to grow, and to reflect on the experience of what it means to be human, and to realize that we have this capacity of self-awareness and self-knowledge that can lead to a kind of self-possession and self-mastery that can ultimately be expressed in the form of self-gift. And a computer will never be able to do that, ever, because it's not a spirit. It's not spiritual.
Yeah.
It's a purely material thing. So while artificial intelligence will vastly outpace man's capacity for computation, it'll never become human because it lacks the ability to do fundamentally human things.
Mm.
So that'll never happen.
But what if someone were to say that this sort of ability to, let's say, like, be kind or to respond with forgiveness, these kinds of things. Someone might say, well, that's just a lot of computation that's going on in the human brain, like weighing positives, negatives, like blah, 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 and then you act on it. Can you train a system to do that?
Well, again, this is a hard point to grasp, but just to reflect back on your language.
Mm-hmm.
Can we train something to do that? Yeah, but the end product of that training is based on an entire set of morally driven, value-based decisions that we are making because we are the kind of beings that can make those kinds of value distinctions, because we have this capacity for transcendence and self-reflection. We can look at the whole in relationship with all of its parts. And so, yes, we can create formulas, we can create programs that teach a computer how to simulate what we're doing.
Mm.
And Pope Leo talks about this throughout. But the simulation is just that.
Yeah,
it's not the actual real thing by which the simulation is generated. So it's the fundamentally human piece of it that we have to pay attention to.
Mm.
So when we come together collaboratively as human beings in all of the dimensions of our human relationality, and that relationality is animated by concerns for justice and peace and love, what we become and what we create is fundamentally different than what's inside of a silicon chip.
Mm.
It's just not the same. It's not even remotely or categorically the same thing.
Yeah.
One thing is a computer, and a computer is a simulation. It's a copy of it like a very a copy of just a function that we can perform as one aspect of the totality of what we are as human beings. It's like saying that it's like looking at an automobile and then thinking that the automobile is just as great of a thing as the one who created the automobile. You never, like, that's ridiculous when you think about it. But you'd say, yeah, but artificial intelligence is going to just, at some point, it's going to transcend us. It's like only because we keep becoming more transcendent. Like we know and understand the structures of the universe with greater accuracy and precision because we're human. We have the capacity to do that. So even though the technology gets greater, that's just proportionate to how much our intelligence gets greater. So the real intelligence is never going to be outpaced by the artificial intelligence, because the artificial intelligence is always going to be the product of our agency and our actions. Now, it's going to get infinitely better at certain low-level functions that we can do. Nobody's denying that. And that is going to and is already having a profound impact on how we are shaping our culture and what that is doing to our humanity. And so that's why we got to look at this. But we always have to remember, and I think this is the key distinction he's making, is that artificial intelligence and real spiritual intelligence are not the same thing, and there is an infinite dignity that attaches itself to the human reality that makes the artificial reality a possibility.
No, that's great. I love that word. No matter how human-like it gets, it's ultimately a simulation. It's because I can imagine that it could be designed in such a way that it gets really, really difficult to distinguish like by the way it's simulated and designed to, think, and even to the point where, maybe I don't know, like if it could learn to react in a way that's unexpected, like where it's not so like 1 and 0, it's, very sort of arbitrary and random. So I can imagine it could get to the point where it's like, holy mackerel, it seems like it's a human, like it decides to respond violently to some, like to a stimulus versus being passive, but it's still ultimately a simulation.
Right, but just let me just push on that a little bit, because first of all, there's scare quotes around all the words you're using in terms of, decision, and it's deciding and it's doing stuff.
Right.
Yes, it is. It is deciding that.
Yeah.
But what we're clearly afraid of is that it's going to do that without any moral agency. And I would say, and that's exactly the point I'm making, and that the Pope's making. It doesn't have moral agency. It's the ones creating the technology that do. And so, yes, could the computer become so self-determining that it becomes this kind of like this machine demon that destroys humanity?
Ultron. It's like Ultron.
Yeah, right. Or the cyborg in Star Trek, or the that in the Terminator series. Is that what you're referring to? The Terminator series.
Well, I was thinking Ultron from the Marvel movies.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. But the fear that we have is that it's going to act without any moral compass or agency. And the reality is it's very likely to do that. But that is the proof of the argument that the Pope is making. Because we can make that moral evaluation and the machine can't, we are still superior to it. And we can make decisions here and now that can direct the use of that technology in such a way that it would never get to that point.
Gotcha.
And we could still, I would argue, that in the end, we would always be able to terminate the machine because it relies upon human agency ultimately. It's sort of like saying, Could mankind ever get so out of control that God could lose control of us? And we have to see a certain proportionality there. It's like, could the machine ever get so powerful that that we would ultimately lose control of it? I don't think so. But it could do a lot of irreparable damage and a lot of harm to us. Ultimately, God, our relationship to God is going to be the determining factor in that. So as long as we remain reverent and religious in our orientation towards the divine, our humanity will always be situated in such a place that we will exercise a proper dominion over the machine. But what will happen is if we lose that divine sense, because we lose our moral compass. Here's the distinction. It's not the machine that will destroy us. We will destroy ourselves by use of the machine. That's the difference. And we will destroy ourselves long before the machines will become so powerful that they would somehow take over. Like, there's a certain dependency and a hierarchy of dependencies here that is inescapable. So the church's wisdom here is so powerful because she's trying to tell us that, and this will come at the end of the document, but our centeredness upon God and Christ in particular, and the revelation of humanity in Christ, is the very thing that's going to help us subordinate our technological capacities to the human good. And that's why this letter is so important, because he's framing out, this is how we need to be thinking about these things. These are the conversations we need to be having. And these are the kind of directives that are going to make better decisions as we move forward in all of this. So hopefully that makes some sense.
It's really good.
So the other thing he says about AI as a technology is just that while it's a very valuable tool, it has to be used with tremendous vigilance. And he kind of focuses on three different areas that we need to keep our attention on. One is we have to be careful around the ease of the results that we get from AI technology. And you know, as an organization, we're already discovering this. Like, we can do in 5 minutes what would have normally taken us hours and hours to do.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And he's not saying that that's in and of itself a bad thing, but we have to maintain a sense of our own creativity, because that's important.
Okay.
So, and he gets into this later about the value of the work that humans should be doing, but also we have to not sidestep the responsibility we have for making judgments, particularly moral judgments. So, like, I'll give you an example. I wrote an article the other day, and, you know, it's really tempting as an author to let AI do more of the creativity and make more of the judgments about what I'm saying, so that it becomes more of an AI project than a Mike Terrian project. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, like, I was writing an article last week, and I thought, where's the line between me being the author and me relying on AI to be just a good editor? So I made sure that I got all my ideas down. This is what I really feel like I need to say. And that was the fruit of reflection, the fruit of research, my human activity, you know, dialogue and conversation, the experience of the work that we do came together in an article, and then I ran it through AI to say, clean up my grammar, clean up my syntax. If you, I'm over by 200 words. Can you take it down to the word count I need to be at without changing my thought, without changing my tone or my voice? See, that's a discernment. So that's exactly what he's talking about. It's like we have to not be so enamored with the ease of AI that we set aside the responsibility that we have for the human activity that we need to bring to bear in whatever we're doing.
So here's my example. In my architecture life, I'm submitting a project to the city of Denver for building permits, which is, I've never done it before because I've always handed it off to somebody who did that. but I was asked to do it, and of course I'm like, sure, I can do that. It's monster beast of a project, right? So I submit the first set, and I get 100 review comments back, referring to very confusing, sometimes very wordy, zoning and building code kind of things. It would have taken me 50 hours at least to go through each one of those, read it, understand it, change my drawings. Instead, I cut and pasted all the review comments into an AI program, and within seconds, it gave me very understandable language. This is what you need to show. This is the note. This is on the page that you have to show this drawing. And I did it. And I mean, honestly, that probably took me 10 to 15 hours versus 50 to 60 hours.
Right. No, that's a great example.
And I could have used my intellect and tried to interpret every single thing that it was saying. But is that laziness, or is that using the tool the way it should be done?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great example. So if I don't totally understand the tasks that you had to do, but let me just assume that it has to do with a lot of regulatory law.
Yeah.
So there you have, this is a great use of AI, where there's all this information out there and this access to data that you need, and AI is going to pull it together for you, and it's going to put something together for you that helps you to be in compliance. But did that take away from any of your design and creativity as an architect? Yes or no?
No.
Okay.
No,
So that's
absolutely not.
important.
Yeah.
So if you were just saying, I'm an architect, and I'm just going to throw in some specs, and you spit out the blueprints, and then I get paid a load of money to do nothing.
Yeah.
It's not really, like, you would be missing out on something,
Sure.
the artistic, the creative, the transcendent dimension of what you're doing. But on the backside, you still have a moral obligation. And the moral obligation is did the AI get it all right? So you still have to go back through, and as a moral agent, you have to evaluate to make sure that AI actually answered the questions, because there's real human effect at play.
Yeah.
And you might bring about an adverse effect on someone's life because you trusted an AI too much.
Right.
So that's something else that he's talking about in
Okay.
there. It's like you as the moral human agent have a personal responsibility to make sure that the human good is achieved by how you're using the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so both on the front end and on the back end of that activity, that's how you would put into practice what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you did do that.
Yeah.
So the second area is what he calls the impression of objectivity, that AI can lead to this impression that whatever it spits out is objectively true. And it creates all sorts of biases in our culture, because in fact there are value judgments that are implied in the results. And there's no guarantee that the narrative that's constructed, or the moral framework, or the philosophical framework with which these data points are put together in the form of an answer are actually true. So again, it takes a human person to engage that, who's intellectually trained. And I'm going to hold off because he says a lot about education, which I think is phenomenal.
Yeah.
We probably won't get to it today, but in the last episode.
Yep.
But biases, that it biases us in ways that can be very destructive and very damaging. And so we have to we have to cultivate the habits of real rational inquiry, dialogue, engagement with the results. We can't just take them at face value. And this is a big concern that I have, because the greatest victim, I think, of AI is going to be the young, who don't have the same educational formation. And we've seen generationally how education is deteriorated because we've lost some of the humanities. Like, we don't know history well. We don't know how to reason,
critical
be logical,
thinking.
critical thinking.
Yeah.
We don't have philosophical ways of understanding the world, the value of literature and narrative and storytelling, and all of these things that help round us out and make us complete humans.
Right.
You know, again, we just focus on the sciences and on the practical, And what ends up happening is people become very proficient at generating powerful tools, but they don't have a sense of their humanity and know how to use those in truly human ways. And that's why we're facing the crisis, because underneath this technocratic crisis we have is an educational crisis that we have because we've thrown out the liberal arts and the humanities.
Yeah.
And we've done it little by little.
Well, I think it's funny, even, I don't know what, like, if all of them say it, but, you know, because we use Microsoft here, we use Copilot a lot. And even, you know, it says very clearly AI can be wrong, you know, like before you type in your prompt. Like, you know, basically is like, it's not perfect. It's, you know, there's like a big warning. It's almost like the explicit label warning on albums, you know, like, and this one says, AI is the tool and it can make mistakes. But people, so it blows my mind that people would still be like, whatever it says is exactly right, you know.
Well, again, you have to form habits of, you know, reason and
right, and that's
engagement.
where the breakdown is.
You know, I mean, I could sit down and read a book and just accept everything that it says at face value, but I have to pause and I have to evaluate it and I have to check it against my experience and against other accounts of the same data and other frameworks that people might be presenting. Like it, you know, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
And again, this is something that you're never going to be able to teach artificial intelligence to do because it's a fundamentally transcendent function of the human soul. Yeah. And it's a spiritual capacity that we have. And no matter how much we try, I just don't think we're ever going to see computers be able to do anything other than curate and cull data. And whatever system of organization or prioritization or valuation is at play is always going to be the result of a human being who's writing that program, who's setting up the algorithm or doing whatever. And that's the illusion. We say, oh, it's the algorithm doing that. It's like, no, it's the people writing the algorithms that are doing that.
Well, I think it is tricky in the sense that if you were to ask it kind of a moral question, it's synthesizing billions and almost like everything that has ever been written about that moral question and putting it into an encapsulated, you know, answer. Like, that's pretty amazing. And so, you know, there's probably in that answer, there's probably things that are right about it. There's probably maybe some of the things that it's saying are things that have been, you know, so in other words, whatever that is, whatever that question is, it's like going through every single article, every like thing, every access to information that's ever been written about that thing and synthesizing.
Right, but there's a couple of things to keep in mind. On the positive side, the vast majority of input that's been put into, you know, these AI, you know, databases comes out of Western civilization, which means that if it's an honest summary or distillation or curation of that information, a lot of those answers from our perspective are going to be pretty right for now.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Until people who are the programmers say, I don't really like that answer. So we're going to bring other information in to bear, and we're going to condition the results to be more reflective of the value system. And that's the downside of it, is that there are real people that have that kind of power to control the outcome. So in the short term, they're going to build our confidence in AI by allowing AI to generate information that confirms our own value system and our biases, which have been shaped by 1,000 years of Western civilization. I said, but it's not. But it's vulnerable to being able to be manipulated with a different value system. And again, it's like, well, who provides the critical criteria by which we discern whether that's true or not? It's not going to be the machine. It's going to be the people. And so that's why at the end, we're in a philosophical struggle over the nature and dignity and meaning of the human person. That's the fundamental question. And so I guarantee you, we're going to start seeing results that more and more distort the view of Christianity and the Judeo-Christian and Western values, and we're going to see other ideological systems come to bear. And by what criteria are we going to make evaluations that say, well, this actually isn't true? This doesn't accord with human experience. You're manipulating people's perception of things. And, I just think that what we're going to always come back to is our own experience. And an example of this, and this actually leads into the third point, which is this simulation of communication. A lot of, these AI friends and counselors and people already, like my own children, have used this function. And their experience is like, it just doesn't feel like a real person is responding to me. It's like, oh, really? Is that a surprise? Yeah. Because you don't feel any human connection, because there has to be a human on the other side of the connection. And if you don't, you're not going to get that sense of human connection. Like you're not going to feel like the other gets you. So you're going to get an answer that responds to you, and it's going to sound pro forma. It's going to sound rubber stamped. Like, do you know what I mean? It's formulaic.
They do a great job of trying to disguise it, though.
Yeah, but I think we know intuitively the difference. But I think that the tragedy is while that innate capacity in a young person is there to say, this doesn't feel human.
Right.
It's also incapacitating them for having real human connections, because we're going to habituate the young to be dependent and reliant upon these artificial intelligences to try to help them come to terms with their humanity. And it's like, you're only going to come to terms with your humanity by being in relationship with other humans that are giving you actual human input and response, both positive and negative.
Yes.
And we're just not going to be able to simulate that. We can simulate it, but we can't make a perfect one-to-one substitution.
Yeah.
Because a human is a human and a machine is a machine.
Yeah, I think the important thing you just said there is the response is both positive and negative. Like, that's super important. And I think the one thing with AI, quote unquote, like conversation, is that it tends to be very vanilla. Like it's not, there's no positive or negative response. Like there's no give and take. It's just always like spitting out this very vanilla kind of language. You know what I mean? There's something about interacting with somebody where you're debating, or you're having an argument, or you're having a push and pull of ideas, or you know what I'm saying? Like a conflict. Like, I don't, it's hard for me. It seems like because AI is just always sort of like, it doesn't take a stand on anything. You know what I mean? So it's like,
I do, yeah.
People are missing that dynamic. And I think that's a very human dynamic of like conviction, like taking a stand, I think you're missing out on a lot when you don't have that.
Yeah. Right. It's connection. It's connectivity.
Yeah.
And there's, it's hard to, like, what do we mean when you say that? But it's like I might want an answer for, like, let's say I'm going through a tough time and I want to connect with you as my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually do this all the time for each other. I am much less interested in your right answer to what I'm struggling with, right? Yeah. If I'm honest with myself.
Sure.
Because I probably already know the answer down deep inside. But I need to be able to experience myself processing my experience of whatever I'm struggling with someone else. And that it's with, so that's the connectivity. And then the someone, not something.
Mm-hmm.
It's a someone. And that someone is someone who can put themselves in my shoes because they've experienced what I've experienced. The computer, the machine, will never have my experience.
Well, right.
And there's this thing called empathy and compassion. And there's this thing called feedback and relatability. And so, like, as I process my experience with you, what I experience is things like I feel understood, I feel known. I feel loved. I feel not alone and isolated, but
Yeah.
with and connected to
Right.
someone who is shoring me up on the inside, who is sharing in this experience with me.
Yeah.
We can simulate that,
Right.
but we can't create it.
Well, for me, that's kind of like, and not everybody believes this, but as a believer, there's the spiritual realm of interaction, like things that are taking place between people that can't necessarily be seen or quantified on a human level experience, but it's felt, it is experienced internally, emotionally, like an interaction spiritually that's happening that, yeah, you're never going to get in that situation. Never.
Never.
Yeah.
Because it's a spiritual reality.
Right.
And that's I've said this before, but I think the age of AI may be the catalyst that actually leads to the rediscovery and the deeper discovery of what it is to be human, that there's something categorically different because we're not just material beings. Technology is an extension of our body.
Yeah.
It's not it's an extension of our spirit as well, in terms of the intelligence that we impute into matter through technology. In other words, every technology is an expression of human reason and human creativity and transcendence and so on. So the form that's in our minds is transferred into the matter that we form and we shape into this technological. But the technology itself, like the phone, the computer, the nuclear bomb, is really an extension of our body. It just allows us to project our body out into the world in a much bigger and more powerful way.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is what that technology, what impact and outcome it brings about depends upon who is using it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a matter of the human heart, and it's a matter of my will and how I order my actions. It's a matter of my mind in terms of what I grasp to be true and good. So if I don't form and shape those things to be in accordance with God, then if I have a reductionistic or a very, very limited view of what I am as a human being, I'm just a material being that needs, clothing and water and shelter. If I do that, then I'm going to develop technologies that serve that end, and I'm going to use those technologies only for those ends. And so that's why. But in the process of doing that, I'm also going to say there's something wrong here. Like I don't feel right.
Yeah.
Like there's more. There's got to be more. Like what's the meaning of my life? And is there nothing more than this? Is this like vanity of vanities?
Yeah.
Is this all I live for? But when you have an experience of friendship or play or creativity or love and connection or justice, and rightness, you're like, okay, this is what it means to be human. This is satisfying. This is fulfilling. This is what makes me feel alive. This is what, it's like, oh, now I get it. This is why I'm here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But we have created a world that has taken those elements of life completely out of our experience and replaced them with all of these artifices.
Yeah. Right.
And we're so miserable. We're anxious. We're depressed. We're filled with lethargy and we're not motivated.
Yeah.
And we don't care. And we're drugging ourselves up and we're escaping our life because it sucks. And so we can't escape that. And that it's forcing us, like, there's got to be more to this thing we call life than what we're experiencing. All right. Responsibility, transparency, and governance. We're getting to the end here of chapter 3, and it's there's just so much here. I'm sorry, it's going to be another long episode. I hope I'm keeping
I'm
keeping
awake.
our attention here.
Yeah.
But I just like this stuff is so amazing. It's just like, I don't know, just like it's so profound that I just love talking about it. But so basically his point in this part of the chapter is just to say that the the direction that we take all of this it's going to be a collective effort. It's a question of mutual responsibility. We all have to take ownership of the process and how we direct it at every level of society. So government has a role, the business sector has a role, the educational institutions have a role, the family has a role, local communities, like all the way down. Like we can't put for example, he makes this comment, you can't put the entire onus of managing social media on the family. And like I know what that feels like.
Oh yeah,
it's like it's
terrible.
too much. Like we need help. Like we need the social media companies to do their part. We need some good regulatory law coming from the government to do their part.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
And then when we work together in this way, we create the kind of scenario that really helps us all thrive.
Yeah.
So that's.
Well, I know as a parent,
the
real
main
quick,
thing.
in that, like, just running into when you have profound differences just with other families, their sort of lack of boundaries, let's say, around social media, with their kids' access to these things. And, so like as a parent who wants to create some healthy boundaries with that, they're interacting with friends who don't have that at all. And I mean, it just makes it very, very difficult. It makes it really difficult. There's no sort of shared boundaries or values around it.
Right, and it begins to feel like you're in a battle.
Oh man, big time.
And even with people that are on side with you, but it's like, again, well, what are other families doing? It's like you want to hold the standard here, and other families want to have it there, but they're all thrown in together. This is where I think the school environment's really important because, and I mean, I've said this before, and I'm sure people might push back on this for me saying this, but I don't think cell phones should be allowed in schools. We communicated fine between schools and parents before the cell phone came up, and for a long time. But I also think that I'm not sure. I could see having simpler phones for kids for texting and calling mom and dad and stuff like that. But I'm not sure smartphones. I would be in favor of seriously looking at the limiting that until you're at least 16. Maybe when you start driving, so that little kids don't have that kind of exposure and they get the proper formation. And again, Pope Leo addresses this later on under education, so we'll tackle it much more in the next episode.
Well, it'll be interesting. Didn't Australia do something like this?
Yeah, there's more and more places are starting to do this kind of thing, but we have to be careful because you don't want to. You can go too far the other direction. So
Yep.
But in terms of that, in terms of that shared responsibility, he goes back and he revisits some of these core principles. So when he talks about, he looks at the universal destination of material goods and he raises the question: does everybody have equal access to technology, and do they have the education around the use of these technologies that they need to be able to participate in our society? And the clear answer to that, when you look at it globally, is no. Okay, in the United States, we might not have that same problem, but worldwide, there's that issue. Then with subsidiarity, he says, are there community level choices? Like, are things decided for us at too high of a level where, all of this development is taking place over our heads where we don't have any real say? Or are we pushing decision making and moral agency down to lower levels? Like parents have real say, local communities, school systems have real say over how these things develop and how they play out. Solidarity. Are we asking the question, who's being harmed by this? And how are they being harmed? And what can we do to prevent people from being harmed by this? So he's part of the shared responsibilities that everybody needs to be asking that question. And I know, like, going back to being dads, I mean, it's plain as day how our kids and our kids as friends are being harmed by this stuff, whether it's video gaming, whether it's social media. I mean, social media has been horrible. I've had to deal with much higher levels of anxiety in my kids than I think my parents ever had to deal with in me, because of what social media has done and the ways that it's manipulated their perception of what's true and good and right. And, and then finally justice, is there a more equitable distribution of power And we also have to look at this phrase that's been all over the internet, that AI has to be disarmed. So in other words, we have to be critical of the ways in which AI is being weaponized to harm one group of people. One group of people have power, and then they harm other people by the use of that technology. And so there's different things that he points out about how, we might, like, for example, you can create profiles in some countries, and they say, oh, you don't get bank credit because we don't like your political beliefs, so you don't get to take a loan out from the bank. That's happening in parts of the world.
Wow.
Or if you don't have this kind of digital ID, you don't get to fly in an airplane. Those are examples of the kind of thing that, you could come up with all sorts of other. We begin to profile people based upon ideological criteria. So he says that what must not be lost in the process of using this technology, of course, is our humanity, and he really talks about the problem of a kind of reductionism, which I've already mentioned, where we have a very reductionistic view of the human person, and we don't see the total person or the whole person, and we don't hold as a good and value all of the dimensions of the human person, but we have this reductionistic perspective. And then that leads into a discussion for him on the problem of, and this is probably the richest part of this chapter, in my opinion, but what he talks about, these underlying narratives that come from the movements of transhumanism and posthumanism.
Wow.
Okay?
Break that open.
Transhumanism and posthumanism. So in a nutshell, there is this belief in the world today that any inherent limit to the human person is an evil that should be overcome.
Such as?
So, for example, just the biological limits of our body.
Okay.
Yeah. Death, suffering,
Okay.
Not everybody has the same mental abilities, things like this. Or people might have a genetic disposition that makes them vulnerable to a particular disease or whatever. And so
So these would be transhumanistic thoughts?
So transhumanism is how can we use technology and practical scientific application to be able to transcend and evolve ourselves to a superior form of humanity. And then and then a post-humanist world is like, how do we integrate ourselves with technology in such a way that we become something that's just on a kind of evolutionary way, not just human in the same way anymore. So you think about Elon Musk wanting to put chips in people's brains, or you think about, connecting digital mainframes with, say, the brain or what we see.
Yeah, we're like Vision from the Marvels.
Yes, it's it's that kind of a thing. And the idea is that while it's good to figure out how to heal or improve what is essentially human, there's this kind of negative bias against how we exist as humans right now, and from a Christian perspective, how we exist in our fragile, broken, and wounded humanity. We say, yeah, we are wounded, we are limited, and we suffer because of this. The transhumanists say, well, the answer to that problem is in the form of technology, whereas the Christian would say, no, the answer is the redemption that we experience in Christ. It's about rediscovering the essence of what it means to be human. So he frames this out by saying that, and this is probably one of my favorite sections, where he talks about the human condition. It's not a reality that we should push aside, but it's a reality that we should have a certain compassion towards and a certain generosity in response to, in the order of love. Because what happens is that the more we face pain and suffering and these limitations, with love and compassion, that's what it means to become more human.
Mm.
That's how we transcend the limits of our humanity. And so suffering has a meaning because it's in the context of vulnerability and suffering that we actually discover the real essence of our dignity, of what it means to be a person. That to be a person is to be a being capable of love and mercy and compassion. That's the highest form of human existence. Not being a technocratic, like master of the universe, like a super power or a super, a meta-human and a superhero kind of like way of seeing things, but rather that the capacity for transcendence in love and in mercy, which we have the capacity to do actually only in the face of suffering, only in the face of those inherent biological and material limitations that we have, that we can mature and grow in love, and that's how we become more human.
Mm.
So there's a kind of Christian meta-humanism, you could say.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's by becoming more conformed to Christ, because the real goal of the human species is to be divinized in Christ and to share and participate in the divine life, which is a life of eternal love.
Yeah.
It's not to become masters of technology.
Well, I can imagine that if you don't believe in a spiritual side of life, or like a post-death kind of life, and your whole all of your eggs are thrown into the fact that you're just a physical human body, then that's going to be your goal, is to try to solve how to, make that last longer. You know what I mean?
Right. It's like, if this is all there is,
right? Yeah.
Then we've got to do everything we can to preserve it. But the irony of it is in the pursuit of preserving that, we sort of buy into a kind of reductionism, and we fail to see what is actually most essential and most fundamental to the human person.
Yeah.
So he says that there's a meaning to our suffering and our limitations, and we're always trying to, while we do want to humanize our human experience with technology, there's ways that we can help us become more what we fundamentally are through the use of technology. But there's also ways in which we can use technology in a dehumanizing way, because it's reductionistic, and therefore whatever doesn't conduce to a greater richness and experience of relationality in the order of love and justice and encounter and connection and all of these things that we've been kind of teasing out today, that then it's a misapplication or a misuse of that technology, and it actually will turn against us and harm us ultimately. So when we use technology in a way that actually amplifies what is essential to us, which is this capacity for transcendence and love and so on, then we really we realize that suffering and limitations has it's a condition that's really important to us, because it is the conditions within which that capacity for the divine is actualized in us. It's like the playground within which we learn how to play at human life. So you can use that analogy. Like, if I'm playing on the playground and I'm trying to play a game and I want to learn how to play the game and become proficient, I'm not going to become good at that game if I don't fall down and scrape my knee, if I don't run into my, you know what I mean? Like, I kind of learn the play of the game precisely within the context of my limitations. And then when you become a really great athlete, it's precisely because you've been able to transcend those limits by doing fundamentally human feats. And that's what I think the Pope is trying to get at, is to say that the reality of suffering and death and pain and these kinds of experiences is the conditions within which the greatest capacity of the human person is realized and unlocked. And that capacity is the capacity for love, compassion, mercy. That's what it means to be truly human.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if technology is harming us in our capacity to do that, then we need to, as human beings, redirect the use of our technologies for the sake of what we might call the human project.
Got it.
So he then ends this chapter by just going back to the image of the two cities, that we have to ask ourselves, which city are we trying to build? Are we trying to build the tower of, the city of Babylon, with the Tower of Babel, that is ultimately going to destroy and fragment and separate the human family and pit us against each other? Or are we coming back to restore the city of Jerusalem and building the kingdom of God? Okay. So that's just chapter 3. There's 2 more chapters, but we're gonna have to come back to those.
Yeah.
Because, it always just, I don't know, I hope there's just so much here.
Great.
So good.
I really appreciate you kind of like going through and presenting it in such a way, because everything you're saying is wrestling with it and talking through it and getting you to throw out examples and stuff like that completely helps me to clarify what he's ultimately trying to say and make sense about it. Like, so I mean, yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with this.
Well, I hope so.
And I'm kind of a dummy, so it's.
I guess if you're following me,
it's
then,
really
then I must be teaching
It's good. It's good.
Making it accessible.
I'm excited for part 4.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening all the way through to the end of this episode. If you did, you're a real champion. So we're going to come back and we're going to tackle chapter 4 in the next episode, and come back because it just gets better and better. And thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe. And if you like this episode, share it with your friends.
See ya.
The Wise Guys Podcast is a production of Preambula Group, a Catholic ministry dedicated to helping you thrive in the heart of Jesus. Visit us on the web at preambula.org and follow us on social media.